This is a full progression guide for a Wintertide brand Occultist League starter, intended for either a trade or solo self-found environment. Now, the first and most important question we need to ask is, how good is Wintertide brand Occultist as a League starter? To answer this question, I did a full 0 to hero SSF test run to find out myself. You see, SSF is a perfect environment to fraud check a build against any bait allegations, because the build needs to 1, be self-sufficient, and number 2, you can't just trade for powerful items from content that your build hasn't cleared yourself. And after fairly comfortably farming all Uber content and SSF with this build, I can only conclude that it's pretty good. And additionally, since there were no Wintertide brand or Occultist nerfs in the most recent patch notes, I expect that it will continue to be a solid League starter. The next question to cover is, why is it so good? Now, this question is more long-winded and will be answered throughout this video, but as a brief overview, Wintertide brand as a skill itself is just very versatile and has a very flexible playstyle. The skill does respectable damage, and although it does fall off a bit later, this can be overcome by swapping to low life. Occultist is also an ascendancy with a lot of built-in quality of life. For example, by the time that you've completed the campaign, your League starter will be freeze immune, shock immune, and stun immune, unconditionally, permanently, and for free basically. This build is also going to be pretty tanky. The basic idea is that during single target pinnacle encounters, you have enough max ES to kind of just tank hits that aren't meant to be one-shots, and for mapping, max block and ES recovery on block mean that you are essentially immortal against a lot of small hits, especially if you're always moving. Another important aspect is that the build is going to function without a lot of chase uniques. Of course, there are luxury endgame items and upgrades that can potentially be very powerful, but the core low-life setup is going to be mostly rares. My goal is to present an accessible, replicable, and thoroughly tested League start guide for people to follow. As such, there's no League-specific borrow power included, so things such as the new graphs we are getting this League are just bonus stats on top of a build that already works on its own. As usual, this guide is going to be split into 3 main sections, going over an early hybrid life ES progression, a low life swap target, and an example endgame setup. At the end of the video, I will touch upon some other class considerations and options. Leveling with Wintertide brand is pretty linear. You pick up Wintertide brand in Act 1 and Cold Snap in Act 2, and from then on you just play vertical cold dot until the end of time. I'm going to make the assumption that you can find your own way through the campaign, and I will be focusing mainly on key progression, breakpoints, and things you need to potentially think ahead for. But I won't leave you entirely in the dark. A written guide is in the notes and in the POB, and you can follow the passive skill tree progression at your own pace. Now, the most important stat I want you to focus on as you level is your chance to block. Now, block is going to be our primary source of mitigation, and how tanky you're going to feel finishing the campaign and entering maps is going to hinge entirely on where your attack and spell block chances are at. So before you enter maps, you need to make sure that your spell block is capped or very close to capped. This is because, number 1, your ascendancy gives you ES based on your spell block, and number 2, we're taking this notable that gives mana regen based on your spell block. Now, spell block is relatively easier to access because of where we start on the passive skill tree. Attack block, on the other hand, is much harder to find. We take a few nodes that are close by, but don't expect your attack block to be close to cap. And honestly, something like 50% chance to block attacks for early mapping is completely fine. The most significant source of attack block is going to be your shield, coming from specifically the stat increased chance to block. Because of this, you should be identifying every rare shield that you come across that you have the attributes to equip to look for the stat. Keep in mind that the crafted version of this mod is only 41 to 50%, and you don't even unlock this craft until something like yellow maps. So likely the best way to get a good shield is just to identify until you hit. In terms of early recovery, number 1, make sure you're taking the Rizlatha Pantheon. Number 2, we're going to be using 2 instant life flasks. The first needs to be unconditionally instant, so something like seething, bubbling. The second needs to be a panic life flask, which is instant if you are on low life, which is below 50%. And then one of these flasks needs to have a suffix that removes bleed or corrupted blood. We're also using Vault Discipline for ES recovery in emergency situations. We're not using the Discipline aura itself, but just the Vault skill itself for when you need to immediately start regenerating energy shield. For our early curse setup, you're going to be self-casting Frostbite, and for elemental weakness, what you're going to do is you're going to link this to your Tempest shield with Hex Touch. Essentially, we have too many buttons to press, so we're going to automate some stuff. I choose not to use Bane because of the early penalty curse effect, but you can use it if you want. If you complete your 4th lab and you get an additional curse, you can link Punishment to Tempest Shield as well, and it does not reserve additional mana. If you're playing trade, The priority upgrade that you should think about making is going up to a 5-link or a 6-link chest. For bases, ideally we are equipping only pure energy shield intelligence bases. We aren't going to be worrying about armor or evasion in this build at all. Something like a pure energy shield 6-link chest is a very good currency sink because you're going to be able to continue using this even when you swap to low life. Speaking of which, moving on to this section regarding swapping from hybrid ES to a low life setup. Keep in mind we are making this decision to switch to low life because it is a very significant boost to our damage, and I would say the earliest you can switch, the better. The two mandatory uniques to make the low life swap are a Brutal Restraint dedicated to Balbala and a Coruscating Elixir. If you're playing SSF, both of these can be systematically target farmed, and in Trade League, I suppose you can just buy them. If you aren't familiar with how the low life setup works, having next to no life pool means chaos damage with Doral, which normally penetrates energy shield, would kill us instantly. To counteract this, we are using a Coruscating Elixir to prevent chaos damage from bypassing energy shield. To sustain 100% uptime on this flask, we are allocating the Trader Notable provided by the Timeless Jewel. And while we're at it, we're going to achieve 100% uptime on all our other flasks as well. Let's go over some big points to make this happen. First, you need a belt with at least 30% increased flask effect duration. Next, you need a medium flask effect duration cluster jewel with exactly fasting and brute for potency. If you don't have this cluster jewel, you can also allocate this flask duration wheel for the same effect, but less damage. Finally, you're going to instill all your flasks with use when charges reach full. Now you have achieved 100% uptime on 3 of our flasks, even if you're just sitting in hideout not killing anything. What's nice about the setup is that firstly, you never have to hit a flask in your life again. It's all fully automated. And secondly, the effects from these flasks are very good for quality of life. For example, this Bismuth flask is going to give us permanent bleed and corrupted blood immunity. You'll also be surprised how nice it is to have the constant speed from Quicksilver, especially while bossing or picking up loot. The fact that we have a permanently active Business Flask and a Ruby Flask also means that it's much easier to cap our resistances and takes a lot of pressure off of our suffixes. To craft these, you're going to alt spam until T1 charge recovery and then beastcraft the bleed immunity, and for the Quicksilver, just benchcraft the regen. You can replace the regen for a different stat if you wanted, but this is just easier to craft. Moving on to the auto-exertion setup. So we have a level 1 General's Cry linked to a auto-exertion in our build. Looks kind of funky, but the reason for this is because we're using a medium exerted attacks cluster jewel with exactly 4 passives with the lead by example notable. This grants onslaught if we have Warcry recently. Recently means in the past 4 seconds. The base cooldown for General's Cry is 3 seconds, so this setup essentially means we have permanent onslaught. If it isn't obvious why this is good, the cast speed from Onslaught is critical to Wintertide brand scaling, and when you combine the permanent move speed and attack speed from Onslaught with our already permanent Quicksilver setup, you're going to have a pretty fast character. By the time that you're swapping to a low-life ES setup, most likely you have progressed a fair amount and you're going to start to take on some harder content. As a result, we need to start to work on our defenses so the build is going to still feel good to play as we move forward. The most important modifier that you're going to need to work on and secure is this ES recover on block for your shield. Because we can no longer just hit a life flask to instantly restore life or hit points, this is an essential layer of recovery to have. Now, what is likely to happen, because whether you are trading for a shield with the ES recovery mod in Trade League, or if you're crafting this in solo self-found, what's going to happen is that you might not be able to secure a naturally high rolled tier of increased chance to block at the same time as the ES block recovery mod. So as a result, most likely you will have to settle with just a crafted increased chance of block on your shield to start. But don't worry, I'm going to give you a number of ways that you can still hit block cap with a crafted block roll. So if we're working with a base shield with 25% chance to block, with a 50% crafted roll, we go up to like 37%. This shield mastery node is going to give us another 7%. A chest implicit from a Eldritch currency is going to give us 5%. You can craft a block prefix for another 7%. You can anoint Testudo for another 10%. This is probably the cheapest anoint you can take. It just costs a black oil and then the 2 cheapest oils, Clear and Sepia. And then you can also use a small cluster jewel that gives another 10% to hit block cap. Now, of course, as your shield gets upgraded, as you progress, you can slowly remove some of these sources of attack block. In terms of other defenses, we are adding endurance charges to this build through a enduring composure notable. You're going to generate charges even if you block hits. So with a cast when damage setup linked to Immortal Call, what's going to happen is that eventually when you do take damage from an unblocked hit, Immortal Call is going to activate and consume all the endurance charges to provide massive damage reduction. And then consuming endurance charges also increases the damage reduction duration. So, and also this build is going to have some increased, global duration because we're a Wintertide brand. And by the time the Immortal Call buff expires, you're gonna have generated maybe like 2 to 3 endurance charges again, so that you're going to be protected against the next unblocked hit. We also have a Curse Mastery that's going to give 40% crit reduction from cursed enemies. If you played enough Path of Exile, you know that this is a premium stat when it comes to not getting one shot. Since we are running a Scatterbots Profane Proxy setup, everything on screen is basically going to be automatically cursed. In terms of other gear, just working towards a higher and higher ES pool is also a long-term project. And then make sure you also have exposure on hit gloves, or else your ascendancy doesn't work. And then crafting increased effective damage ailments on your boots is a sleeper strong craft. This is because this mod scales your shock effect from your Skitterbots, as well as a chill effect, which contributes to bone chill. So you're getting double effect out of this for increased damage taken from enemies. In this last section, I want to give you guys some idea of what a potential endgame setup might look like. Obviously, this is more trade-oriented because I'm now including some kind of like luxury items that you probably won't find in SSF, but hey, who knows, you might drop one anyways. And, just for reference, this setup has probably around 3 times the DPS that I had when I killed Ubers in SSF, so, it's really like more about how to min-max the character. So, really quickly, so to cover some main points, 2120 Wintertide brand, Awakened Gems, standard. I think in terms of the tree, the most important part is probably this Impossible Escape that's connected to Blood Magic radius. It allows us to pick up this cluster of block nodes, which is 20% block for attack block, as well as 3% max attack block, which is really nice. You can also pick up this node here. Because we have a auto-exertion war cry, this basically reads 8% increased damage taken by enemies. Now, in terms of other jewels, we have pretty standard stuff. Watcher's Eye, Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Set, Lighted Meeting, standard stuff. Other uniques, we have the Ashes of the Stars, which is absolutely best in slot for Wintertide brand for damage and quality of life reasons. In terms of rare gear, it's just about maximizing your energy shield as well as your damage. Specifically, I want to quickly go over the shield. You have a couple options, right? So here I have a mostly offensive shield. Of course, the 2 stats that you want to prioritize, as mentioned throughout this video, are increased chance to block as well as the recover energy shield on block. Every other stat is going to depend on what you want to prioritize. So if you want like a more defensive shield, you can, for example, equip a shield with energy shield instead of damage mods. To wrap up, I want to give my thoughts on Wintertide brand Elementalist as well as Trickster. To bring you up to speed, in the patch notes, Elementalist got a nerf to its golem scaling, and then Trickster got a nerf to its defenses. And of course, Occultist got no nerfs. I think that all 3 classes are still good options for Wintertide brand. Last league, I league started a Trickster, and it was good all throughout. And this league, the damage portion is going to be unchanged. You'll be a little bit less tanky because of the spell suppression changes, but it will still work fine. If you are torn between Elementalist and Occultist, keep in mind that because they're both witch classes, you can just Forbidden Set the Ascendancy. And also, if you absolutely hate the class, you can just swap Ascendancies at any time. So, as someone who has league started Wintertide brand for 12 leagues in a row, I'm going to sit here and tell you, just play your favorite class and you'll be fine. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. I am happy to answer any specific questions on crafting or SSF specific progression. Else, thank you for watching and good luck at league start.